Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I want to ask you, speaking of some nastiness out there, and we're not going to play some of these, but there's some pretty nasty radio ads and some audio, some phone calls that are out. Very racist in its intentions, some gross stereotypes. Look, race is popping up in this campaign. The first time you and I talked on air, on the day you were the nominee, the issue of race popped up with a phrase that your opponent had used. What would you like to see? The Republican Party has distanced itself from this. In fact, they've all denounced this ad. Is there more, do you think, the Republican Party can do to help eradicate this style of politicking?
Well, I have to tell you, leadership starts at the top. When Mr. DeSantis became his party's nominee, he went on Fox News and told people not to monkey up the state by electing me, a phrase that is not commonly used so far as I know, certainly not amongst any of the circles that I'm in. And quite frankly, I think people are taking their cue. What I think they ought to do is, quite frankly, stop the dog whistles, stop the bullhorns. The attacks on me, the false ads that are being running are all intended to, quite frankly, further a stereotype about black men. Illegal, unethical, take things for free, monkey it up, jungle animals. I mean, those kinds of things. It's not hard to understand why neo-Nazis would take an extension of that and then take it to the next level of extremity. What I think they're doing, however, is they're grossly underestimating and misestimating the people of this state. The people of Florida are going to dismiss, they're going to, in fact, reject that brand of divisive, destructive rhetoric. We're one of the most richly diverse states in all of America. We're going to show them on November 6th that they have played their hand the wrong way.
Do you think that's
Florida
why,
voters want to hear what we're going to do?
Do you think that's why we've had two polls in a row that have shown you up substantially, frankly? A lead that I don't believe, and it's a surprising lead. Do you think you're that far ahead?
Listen, you don't want to ask me about polls. There wasn't a single poll showing me winning the Democratic nomination at all. Even the day before the election, I think the poll had me 7 points behind my closest opponent. As I've told our supporters, forget the polls. The only poll that matters is Election Day, November 6th. Early voting has already started in this state, and I'm encouraging everybody to get out there and vote. When we vote, we win. When our voters organize and get out there and vote, we win. And so forget the polls. I don't care about them. I want people to get out there and let their voices be heard at the ballot box. That's how we're going to win this race.
It is Wednesday, the 24th of October of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes, indeed. You know, a really nice hollandaise sauce is the perfect example of the balance. Well, we'll say the emulsification of church and state. Done badly, it will just be the scum on the top. And you got to be careful of that. So, the great experiment is now being tested as, I got to tell you, a lot of us suspected would happen. you've got a party, the ruling party, who are pulling out every single stop that they can get. The xenophobia and the fear and, just ginning up all that. That's bad enough. But when you got Donald Trump, ostensibly the President of the United States of America, tweeting out that Republicans will protect pre-existing conditions, and the Democrats won't. So it's obviously an absolute lie. Maggie Haberman calls it genius. George Soros had a pipe bomb in his mailbox. Breaking news earlier here is that Bill and Hillary's place had some suspicious device. They're investigating that. Right now, maybe I'm in the bubble, so I'm not taking any more news, and that may have been ferreted out by now. But definitely, if Democrats weren't so uncivil, if they would just get out of the way and let these people run over America and make it into some whatever fascist utopia they think they want. Because they don't really know. And don't think about being, an American citizen redressing your grievances with the government. That you're a mob, especially if you're from the left, brown, black, or, non-white. Let's put it that way. Trump admitting that he's a nationalist. Yeah, everybody says, oh, well, he's saying white nationalist. Well, I hear nationalists, and yeah, white nationalist is part of that. But what I hear is Nazi. America first, Nazi. All right? I hate Nazis. I will never be a nationalist. I am an American, and Americans have historically kicked Nazi ass. So it looks like we're going to have to do it again. In spite of the fact that we have, like the Secretary of State of Georgia running for governor, mucking up the works there. He just got implicated in almost $1 million fraud scheme against a bank or some sort of monetary institution that he started. But he's going to bring up that Stacey Abrams was at a protest where the state flag had been burned. Of course, she had nothing to do with it, but she was in the area. And what is the story that leads? Yeah, Stacey being at the protest where a Confederate flag was burned, and that's supposed to be unpatriotic. Where's the story about Brian Kemp's fraud against a monetary institution? Yeah, that should be leading, shouldn't it? Oh, but let's put on the front page. Thank you, Dean. Front page. Let's put the caravan 2 days in a row. That'll gin up some racial animosity. Isn't that how it works? The paper of record. And I mean like how like a wrecking ball. That kind of record. We got our work cut out for us, folks. Trump's already laying the groundwork for, if it's close, the election will be adjudicated illegitimate. Why do you think they put all these judges, and they've been holding these spaces open for all these judges for all this time? Do you think this has just been planned recently? Look, the aliens in Independence Day and They Live teamed up and have basically made what we have today, and we need more than special sunglasses now. And we need more than a cold virus, too. Okay? What we need are massive numbers of voters to go out, and we got to just overwhelm them. We got to rout them. Because if it's close, that's how they always work. They can only work the margins. And they're trying hard. 1 million off the rolls in Georgia alone. They put all their little pieces on the board. They move this pawn here and that rook there. And next thing you know, you're almost in checkmate. And the clock is ticking. What's on the rest of the menu here today at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Well, at the top, that was candidate for governor. You know, DeSantis didn't even call him mayor. Andrew Gillum, the candidate for governor, used a proper honorific when referring to DeSantis. So it's good to hear that at least he's being acknowledged in some ways being at least the Democratic candidate for governor of Florida. Well, that was him talking about the racism he's encountered at the hands of DeSantis and his supporters, because that's how they work. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, hey, the Department of Agriculture is getting in the private prison industrial complex business. I mean, if you're going to keep a lot of brown people, from coming in and picking our crops, you might as well put them in prison. Make them work. The main union representing the Border Patrol just endorsed a white nationalist film after a private screening because it spoke to them, resonated. And Trump picked a former Monsanto executive to lead the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Who knows better how to destroy the environment than, a former Monsanto executive? Well, after the break, we then moved to the chef's table, where Amazon pitched ICE to buy its facial recognition surveillance technology. Okay, I have no idea. Okay, what could go wrong? And in response to the Trump administration efforts to open up federal waters, Oregon moves to ban offshore drilling. Why anybody would want to drill off the Oregon coast? They call it the Pacific because it's a lie. It's fake news. It is far from Pacific. You do not want to drill there. Please. Oregon's doing the right thing. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com, and you will notice as the page loads some links in which you can determine if you are registered to vote and to register to vote. So please do that. There are still many states in which you can register to vote and many states in which they can still kick you off the rolls. So make sure you're registered to vote and register to vote. And if you haven't voted already, in fact, even if you have, get some other people to vote. If you're getting ready to go vote, take some people with you to vote. We have to overwhelm them with overwhelming numbers, okay? Layers on top of layers. They're going to contest it anyway. But it's easier to contest it if it's close, because they do it every time. Look, you have the Brooks Brothers rioters. We already have the Proud Boys. They've moved from Brooks Brothers suits right into the brown shirts now. Okay, so please do that and do vote. Go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, which reminds me you can go ahead and check out her shows on Saturday. At the Table with Kelly Lincoln is at 3 p.m., and that's on the West Coast, which means it's 6 p.m. on the East. And then later on, she teams up with Ricky, and they command the Round Table Roundhouse Power Hour, beginning at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast, and it lasts for a whole power hour. So there's always more in that hour, but it's a power hour. Look to the leftish of at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com from the chat room link, and you will then notice the contribute button. Please do become a Patreon of Netroots Radio. If you can afford a coffee a month, maybe to slip that our way, that goes a long way here. Resistance Radio is not free, but we are cheap, and we make a little go a long way. Thank you for your generosity. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. You can follow us on Facebook as well. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and I try to get it out on the social media platforms before showtime, sometimes a little after. But yeah, bookmark that diary, because the show notes and links are a integral part, a very important part of the show, because we are a multimedia operation. The only thing we lack, and I don't know, maybe we're beyond that technology, is the overhead projector. Okay. At least within the broadcast part of it. Okay. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. We're on Facebook, and pick up podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, well, Sonny Perdue. What would Sonny Perdue do if Sonny Perdue could do what he wanted to do? Well, Sonny Perdue's decided to get into the prison industrial complex business because if you plant the seed, it will grow. This is an article out of Think Progress here, and brought to us by Alan Pike. Elected officials hungry to build new revenue-generating jails in far-flung corners of the country are expanding their use of an unlikely funding source to get the deals done: farm money. I mean, who needs agriculture? Well, you know what's going to happen. They are going to be prison labor farms. Some people might call them re-education camps. And who might populate the re-education camps? I don't know. They have a farm club in the tender age baby jails right now, don't they? The Department of Agriculture doesn't have that, but that could be a farm team for the Farm Bureau. Plant the seed, and it will grow. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's sponsoring of jail projects is not entirely new, but the agency charged with stewarding U.S. food-making efforts is cranking the faucet open for jail projects in new ways under Donald Trump's administration, according to a new report from the Vera Institute of Justice. No relation. A USDA Rural Development Loans Fund opened under President Nixon has pitched in $360 million for jail projects around the country since the agency first embraced jails as a rural economic developmental tool in 1996. Hey, wait a second. That sounds like welfare reform and Clinton. What the hell? Give a rat a cookie, and they always want a glass of milk. You learn that on the farm, you know. Nearly 30% of that total has come in the past 2 years, with the Trump administration approving roughly $106 million in funding for rural jails out of the Agriculture Department's budget. So, since 1996, there's been $360 million spent on these jail projects. But 30%, a third of that, was just since Trump took office. Now, what is the definition of fascism again? A melding of corporate, private, public interest for a particular authoritarian rule? The spike in spending over Trump's first 2 years mimics but significantly exceeds a jump in jail funding from USDA budget lines in 2015 and 16. Some of the jail projects greenlighted through the agency most people rightly associate with soybeans and cows lay bare the crude economic math by which USDA first justified its expansion into the incarceration business. Greene County, New York is getting USDA money to build a new jail capable of holding twice as many people as the county's average daily jail population from last year. Empty jail beds don't make the county any money but filling them, especially with federal detainees generated by, say, Trump's immigration crusade, brings juicy per-prisoner reimbursements. We aren't guilty of being fascist. We were just doing our jobs. Matthew Chapman of Alternet brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The National Border Patrol Council, the union representing agents of the U.S. Border Patrol, endorsed the far-right film Killing Free Speech after his agents were treated to a private screening in San Diego. The nearly hour-and-a-half-long video refers to Democrats as dark and evil, features a bevy of American, European, far-right, anti-Muslim white nationalists who make a correlation between gang rapes, Islam, and immigration. The documentary also features members of the Proud Boys, a hate group designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center that often aligns with white nationalists and are known for being misogynist and anti-Muslim. The Proud Boys participated in the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, and in mid-October, several members of the Proud Boys were arrested in New York City after a violent street confrontation with anti-fascists. Well, that's one way of putting it. In a press release, they are described described killing free speech as a powerful spotlight on the terrifying assault on liberty in America today. A country heading down the road toward Orwellian control of information by a small but powerful cabal. Jewish cabal, do you mean? The release also invites viewers of the video to dissect the daily propaganda used by mainstream media who will stop at nothing to mislead the public and discredit and demonize those who risk their lives protecting America's borders. Oh, really? The movie was directed by Michael Hansen, a Danish immigrant whose previous work, Killing Europe, depicts immigrants to Europe as causing a rape crisis. Oh, really? On his film's Vimeo page, Hansen brags about how the Border Patrol was involved in this project, saying, for the first time, Border Patrol agents agreed to be filmed and expose the media lies and smears about our agents and the crisis at the border. The Border Patrol has come under increased scrutiny in recent years. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that a two-dimensional a rendition of somebody of Teutonic heritage? Yes, it was. The Border Patrol has come under increased scrutiny in recent years, with a recent report detailing 116 incidents between 2009 and 2004, in which agents physically or sexually abused Central American child migrants between the ages of 5 and 17, and you want to know why we have baby gulags now? Why do we have young teenagers kept in separate little, tender-age solitary confined rooms? Where are the girls? More broadly, there have long been concerns about right-wing extremists and white supremacists infiltrating law enforcement, with the FBI quietly investigating the presence in local police departments as part of its counter-terrorism efforts. Well, at least someone's on the job. The possibility that the Border Patrol could contain personnel who support white supremacist ideology is deeply disturbing, but in this reporter's opinion, not shocking, as it always has been, so it always will be. And as the family separation crisis continues to simmer in the background, it raises fresh doubts that our government has a real interest in the well-being or basic human rights of migrants because they're not people to them. These are supremacists, nationalists we're talking about. They don't care, and they want these things out of their way. Progress brings us this last offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump announced that he intends to nominate a former agrochemical industry official to lead the Department of Interior's Fish and Wildlife Service. The selection of Aurelia Skipwith, who worked at Monsanto for 6 years to head the Fish and Wildlife Service, carries on a Trump administration trend of filling top environmental regulatory positions with officials from companies regulated by the agency. In this reporter's opinion, that's known as business as usual when it comes to Trump. If confirmed by the U.S. Senate, Skipwith's duties will include, they say, enforcing federal wildlife laws. That means not enforcing them, okay? Not protecting endangered species, not managing migratory birds, and definitely not conserving and definitely not restoring wildlife habitat. Environmental and conservation groups largely condemned Skipwith's nomination, noting that she spent the past year and a half at the Interior Department helping to oversee the administration's dismantling of wildlife and national monument protections. Did she know when the flag was up when Zinke would be in? Skipwith worked for seed and pesticide giant Monsanto from 2006 to 2012, finishing her time at the company in its corporate affairs department. Skipwith currently serves as a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks at the Interior Department, where she is responsible for not protecting the lands and water in national parks and not protecting the wildlife refuge system. Well, some might say, in this reporter's opinion, I don't know. It seems more like fact to me. Ms. Skipwith's nomination is business as usual for an administration that has sought to reward its allies at the expense of public lands and wildlife, Chris Sager, executive director of the Western Values Project, said. In a statement, Sager alluded to Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke's recent announcement that the department would make a grand pivot to conservation. That's a lie. It's a lie on the par of they're now the champions of pre-existing conditions. Yeah, they're the champion of pre-existing conditions to make sure that insurance companies don't have to cover that. Of course they're for that. And in this situation, the Interior Department is not there to conserve these open tracts of land except to make it available for private industry to extract, as God intended. And it says it right there in their mission statement. All right, let's get out of here and get to our break. All right, and then when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again. From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Another Man. Damien Chazelle's First Man refers to Neil Armstrong, first human to set foot on the moon. It follows his entrance into the Gemini program all the way to his historic Apollo mission. The hook for this latest space race flick is Chazelle's focus on how dangerous the journey was and how terrifying it was to crawl into newly conceived capsules sitting on top of missiles to be shot into space. This means loads of extreme close-ups, handheld camera, first-person perspective shots, and detailed Foley work of every creak, groan, and pop that a capsule leaving the atmosphere can make. First Man stars the Brad Pitt for millennials Ryan Gosling and a thoroughly wasted Claire Foy. Yes, wasted. You see, these great men movies had a problem. They lionized heroic males who benefited from a society that held women in socially, sometimes legally enforced, domestic servitude. Cooking meals, cleaning house, raising children, having more children, giving men the freedom to go to the moon, make movies, or make movies about men going to the moon. Women rightly complained that they'd been left out of history, so now when you do a great man movie, you are obligated to show the woman behind him. The problem is, until we learn how to dramatize regular domestic responsibilities, there's not much for these women to do. Which leads us to the woman with the most cinematically engaging face in 4 decades, Claire Foy, playing Janet Armstrong. In a way, it's perfect casting for a movie with such spare dialogue, because one shot of Foy's eyes, and you can cut a page and a half of speech. But other than 2 angry outbursts, which seem more calculated to make Janet appealing to modern sensibilities than appropriate for her character, there's not much for Foy to do other than look worried. Why did she take this role? Maybe it was a career move. It gets her another American film credit, this one for a high-profile biopic going into Oscar season. So maybe it's a smart stepping stone. Let's hope she steps into a role that's more worthy of her talents. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Answering some questions from the press in the Oval Office on Tuesday, Donald Trump called the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi the worst cover-up ever.
They had a very bad original concept. It was carried out poorly, and the cover-up was one of the worst in the history of cover-ups. It's very simple. Bad deal, should have never been thought of. Somebody really messed up. And they had the worst cover-up ever. And where it should have stopped is at the deal standpoint, where they thought about it. Because whoever thought of that idea, I think, is in big trouble. And they should be in big trouble.
The Trump administration says it is still trying to corroborate available evidence about journalist Jamal Khashoggi's fate obtained from intelligence sources. Trump has vacillated about those he believes are behind the alleged killing and about whether the United States will punish Saudi Arabia, a strategic ally in the Middle East, in response. Trump spoke to reporters hours after President Erdogan of Turkey delivered a speech repudiating the Saudi explanation that Khashoggi died during a fistfight inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Less than 2 weeks out from the midterm elections, the Republican tactic from Trump on down right now is to go all caravan all the time, making stuff up about who makes up the 7,000 to 10,000 refugees now walking towards the U.S. through Mexico. Trump has been saying that gang members and Middle Eastern terrorists are among them. He doubled down on his lies before admitting to CNN's Jim Acosta that there's no proof of his assertions.
They've intercepted good ones and bad ones. They've intercepted wonderful people for the Middle East, and they've intercepted bad ones. They've intercepted wonderful people from South America and from other parts further south. They've intercepted a lot of different people, but among the people they've intercepted very recently are people from the Middle East. Okay? So you can't be surprised when you hear it. You've heard that before. It happens all the time. And I spoke to him literally last night. I spoke to another one this morning. Very good relationship with Border Patrol and ICE. And they say it happens all the time from the Middle East. But it's not even saying bad or good, but some real bad ones. But they intercept. They're in the Caribbean. Well, they could very well be.
But there's no proof.
There's no proof of anything. There's no proof of anything. But they could very well be. If you look at what that was building, you know, they were talking about 5,000 or 6,000 people. I'm pretty good at estimating crowd size, as you probably have figured out. You tend to get it little bit off the real number. Last night, as an example, that was record-setting stuff, wasn't it, huh? But
even Fox News' Jim Cavuto called Trump out on his lies.
I want to stress here, there has been no independent confirmation of some of these migrants being terrorists or certainly parts of MS-13 or any other nefarious elements. There's simply no way to prove that. The suspicions notwithstanding, suspicion isn't good enough, and as the president said, I thought this was a takeaway, there is no proof of anything, which is not exactly a reassuring comment to make when you make a charge like that.
Meanwhile, Trump keeps lying about the alleged arms deal with Saudi Arabia. MSNBC's Chris Hayes explains.
When it comes to Trump and Saudi Arabia, the policy is the customer is always right, which is why President Trump seems to be overcompensating lately when he comes to talking up the number of jobs that are supposedly going to be created by these arms deals that we've got. Now, the original deal was supposedly going to create 40,000 jobs, but then Trump made it bigger.
I worked very hard to get the order for the military. It's $110 billion. I believe it's the largest order ever made. It's 450,000 jobs.
Okay. Now, two things here. The $110 billion number itself, we know to be an exaggeration, but 450,000 jobs? Now, that is a lot of jobs. Although I think it might sound a little better if you round it up a bit.
They have a tremendous order, $110 billion. Every country in the world wanted a piece of that order. It's 500,000 jobs.
500,000 jobs. We're up to 500,000 jobs. Nothing has changed about the deal, of course, but in 2 days, we somehow went up 50,000 more jobs.
We have $450 billion worth of things ordered from a very rich country, Saudi Arabia. 600,000 jobs, maybe more than that.
600,000. Do I hear 600,000? And now it's a $450 million deal.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced the United States would revoke visas of Saudi operatives who are accused of killing Khashoggi, stressing that the U.S. was still learning the facts. He didn't specify how many visas would be withdrawn. Donald Trump will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Paris just days after the U.S. midterm elections on the sidelines of a planned ceremony in France marking the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. And finally, at least one winning ticket was sold in South Carolina for Tuesday night's record-shattering Mega Millions jackpot worth at least $1.6 billion. Authorities in New York are investigating what is being described as an improvised explosive device found near Bill and Hillary Clinton's home in Chappaqua, New York. This comes one day after a bomb was discovered in a mailbox at a house belonging to George Soros, a major Democratic Party donor who has long been the target of conspiratorial right-wing rhetoric. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it alone. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Wednesday, October 24th, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger. The labor movement is becoming increasingly concerned about the impact that artificial intelligence, AI, will have on workers around the world. This is because vastly more powerful computer systems are being joined to massive amounts of data to produce intelligent systems. They are being considered intelligent because they can take raw data, manipulate that data into understandable information, and ultimately produce knowledge. But is that data, information, and knowledge biased because it is being produced mainly by young white men in developed countries? In this, the third in our series about artificial intelligence, I continue my conversation with Christina Kolclough. Ms. Kolclough is the Director of Platform and Agency Workers, Digitalization and Trade at Uni Global Union. Uni represents some 20 million workers in the skills and services sectors. I asked Ms. Kolclough about potential biases being built into AI systems by today's programmers.
You're dead right here that there is that imbalance in the programmers right now, but also in the data sets. I think, if I can just give a little story there, the interest of U.S. companies or Western or global North countries is in Africa right now, as well as the Chinese companies in Africa, is not only because this is still a continent in the world where there's potential for growth, but it's also because the Africans are sitting on enormous amount of unexplored data. And if we look at it, most of the artificial intelligence and the data sets that we have in the West, is based on our culture, our norms, our values, which is by far, of course, not representative to the whole world. So one thing is that a lot of programmers are maybe young white men. Another thing is that the combined aggregated data sets are still very biased or imbalanced in their representation. Now, when all of that is said, yes, we are calling for a genderless, unbiased AI. And this is a dream because, humans are biased and therefore data sets will almost automatically be biased. But when we have acknowledged that, we should try to put in place mechanisms that check for that bias, that somehow also counteract it. If we pretend that the data is not biased, is not gender discriminative, then we will not get anywhere. So this is a call for technicians to put check and balances in place around the nature of their data.
You said Africans are sitting on an enormous amount of unexplored data. I don't understand that. Explain that for us.
Well, it's a resource in Africa, but a resource for the rest of the developed world, potentially. I mean, right now in Africa, internet penetration on average across the whole continent is only 35%. This means that 65% of the population in Africa still do not have access to the internet. Now, can you imagine when those figures start rising, those that do have access to the internet, what totally new insights could be made on how African people, South African, Kenyan, Nigerian, wherever the country is, what their preferences are. One thing is that Google now has a very good idea about what a typical woman my age might search for on the internet or what products and services we like to buy. But what about the African people? In their cultures, in their settings, in their belief systems and their values, what are their interests? What do they search for? How can this be used to new avenues? And I know this sounds awful, but this is reality, new revenues of advertising, of product placement, of manipulation, and so on.
This has been the third in a series about the effects of artificial intelligence. You can find other programs in the series on our website at www.radiolabor.net. The fourth in our series will focus on potential job loss and a just transition for workers. And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. President Trump announced on Saturday the U.S. will terminate the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia, a 1987 deal that banned either country from owning missiles with ranges between 300 and 3,400 miles. That deal kept Cold War rivals far enough apart so that ground-based missiles deployed in Europe wouldn't trigger an armed conflict. Both sides destroyed thousands of such missiles while still holding on to sea and air-launched systems that Washington and Moscow thought key to nuclear deterrence. Russia and the U.S. now accuse the other of violating the deal, Russia for developing and deploying new intermediate-range missiles, and the U.S. for deploying land-based missile systems to Poland and Romania. Matthew Bunn, a professor at Harvard's Kennedy School, admits the INF has been in peril lately, but says shredding the deal is a mistake.
What this does is it frees Russia to build as many of its prohibited missiles as it feels like, while putting all the blame on the United States rather than Russia.
National Security Advisor John Bolton reportedly thinks an INF replacement should constrain not just the U.S. and Russia, but North Korea, Iran, and China too, something Bunn thinks is a non-starter for Beijing.
Most of their missile force is precisely in the ranges prohibited by the INF treaty. So why would they sign up to a treaty that would force them to dismantle most of the missiles they have built over the last few decades?
Richard Burt, an arms control negotiator under President George H.W. Bush, fears that the lack of a viable replacement deal means an arms race is in the cards.
In my view, the INF decision has us sleepwalking into a new nuclear arms race where both Russia and the United States are now spending over $1 trillion on a new generation of intercontinental range systems. This is going to have consequences for us and our allies that we haven't thought through.
Luke Farkas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Oh, my. Hey, and it can be in the Manhattan style, and if you don't know what that is, you should try it. It's very lovely and sophisticated. All right, well, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 43 degrees Fahrenheit, and it says that we're going to be much warmer than we were yesterday, and we're slated for a high of 67. And that could be correct. We were around 60 maybe, and we were supposed to be, fairly dry yesterday, but we had rain. Well, other people in other parts of the country would call it rain, but it was a little more than a sprinkle and a little more than intermittent. The garden loves it. The lawn loves it. It's the time of year when we want the trees to get the water. So that was quite a surprise, and a lovely surprise it was. It seemed pretty much like a fall day. So we expect that today because it is partly cloudy, and it looks like we will be partly cloudy throughout the day. Now, they're telling us that there is no percentage of chance of precipitation, but when I look at the satellite pictures and the radar, seems like there's quite a bit of wet cells of water floating around in the sky all around the area. And when I was out in the garden a bit earlier, it felt moist. So I don't know. This particular weather station a couple of miles from where the mothership is, I don't know. I think it's reading something different than what I'm experiencing. We're supposed to have an overnight low in the mid-40s. Winds are out of the west-southwest, light and variable, about 1 mile per hour, and they will remain so throughout the day, through the night, and through tomorrow, where we are slated to have a high, oh my God, of 75 with an overnight low in the upper 40s. Well, we'll see how that turns out. We do have showers slated. Showers. And when we say showers in Oregon, it's going to be real rain. Because we don't call just rain showers. Just letting you know. But showers are slated for Friday and Halloween. So take care out there. Locally, the ragweed pollen is the leading pollen that's bothering people, and that's registered at moderate. The air quality index is in the good range and has come down a couple of notches to 47 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is hovering in the moderate range at 3, as it has been for a little while now. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.03 inches. Visibility is coming down to 8 miles, and that relative humidity is at 87%, so no wonder it felt moist out there. Okay, so weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 63 and sunny. Paris is 61 and cloudy. Rome is 73 degrees and sunny. God, I want to be having an espresso right there in the Spanish Steps in this weather in the fall in Rome. How nice. Kiev is 44 degrees and fair. Kabul is 59 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 73 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 64 and also partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 61 degrees and merely cloudy. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 49 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And you continue to have a small craft advisory for strong winds in the 50 to 60 degree gust range. So take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. First offering here at the chef's table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is an article out of Alternate by Alex Henderson. Although deportations of undocumented immigrants were plentiful during the Obama years, ICE has become even more aggressive under the Trump administration, and one of ICE's allies could be Amazon.com. Now, I'm a little confused because I was certain that Trump really doesn't like Bezos. But then on the other hand, who does? Over the summer, the e-commerce giant met with ICE officials to discuss recognition. Amazon's, and they have a K in it. Why don't they just put 3 Ks? Recognition. Amazon's facial recognition technology. And while selling recognition to a major government agency like ICE could be highly profitable for Amazon, critics of ICE's Trump-era methods are asserting that the potential for abuses is strong. Potential? Well, Alonzo Pena, ICE's former deputy director, told the Project on Government Oversight that if ICE uses recognition, possible overreach should be an area of concern. Pena asserted, I think they have this technology. I can see it being used in any way they think will help them increase the number of detentions, apprehensions, and removals. You look just like a terrorist. It's in the way you look. It's in the way you walk. It's the cheekbone and eyes. Oh, you're really fun. Oh, my God. According to the Project on Government Oversight, ICE agents visited Silicon Valley. Now, some people call it Silicone, but a lot of people in the area call it Silicon. In June, and met with Amazon reps at the Redwood, California offices of the consulting firm McKinsey & Company, which previously had a management contract with ICE. And on June 15th, an Amazon Web Service rep sent a thank you email to ICE's Homeland Security Investigations Office. Thanks again for your interest in AWS to support ICE and the HSI mission. If there's interest in further exploration, we can schedule a meeting to review the process in more depth and help assess your target list of challenges. That's the guy from Amazon. When Pogo asked ICE, that was a Project on Government Oversight, by the way, how many times they had met with Amazon, an ICE spokesman said in an email, we cannot provide data on how often we met with a particular vendor to discuss emerging technology they're developing, but industry outreach and building relationships with potential contractors is fairly standard within government acquisition. Said like a true fascist. In May, the ACLU noted that some local police departments had been using recognition, including the Washington County Sheriff's Office in Oregon, right here in the state I am residing in. And the ACLU was critical, describing recognition as a product that can be readily used to violate civil liberties and civil rights. Now, Amazon's recognition raises profound civil liberties and civil rights concerns, and today the ACLU, they continued, and a coalition of civil rights organizations demanded that Amazon stop allowing governments to use recognition. Some Amazon employees have been wary of recognition as well. In an anonymous commentary for Medium.com, an Amazon employee complained, "We know from history that new and powerful surveillance tools left unchecked in the hands of the state have been used to target people who have done nothing wrong. In the U.S., a lack of public accountability already results in outsized impacts and over-policing of communities of color, immigrants, and people simply exercising their First Amendment rights. Ignoring these urgent concerns while deploying powerful technologies to government and law enforcement agencies is dangerous and irresponsible. And obviously, that do-gooder egghead is a commie socialist, isn't he now?"
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
E.A. Crunden of Think Progress brings us this last offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oregon plans to permanently block offshore drilling off of its coast, and the latest indicator that efforts by the Trump administration to expand oil and gas exploration and development in federal waters remains highly unpopular in coastal states. I wonder why. The move also comes amid a tightening race for governor that could significantly impact how Oregon addresses climate issues going forward. On Monday, Oregon Governor Kate Brown, Democrat, announced that the state will move to ban offshore drilling, a move supported by green groups and environmental advocates. Across Oregon, we are certainly seeing the strain of climate change and pointing to increasingly devastating wildfires, as well as persistent algal blooms in state waters and the rise of deadly storms, trends climate scientists have attributed to global warming. At a time when the states are doing more than the federal government to protect the environment, the Trump administration is trying to allow oil rigs to be built off of every single coastline in America except for Florida. Well, when there's a black governor there, trust me, there's going to be oil rigs, not just off the coastline, but right on the beach. Well, let me put it this way. No drilling has occurred off of the coast since 1964, and the state technically only controls the area 3 miles out from its shores. But the move further establishes Oregon's stance on a highly controversial issue, one that has seen states almost unanimously pitted against the federal government. Now, let me just mention here, these aren't Pacific waters. There's nothing calm about our waters here. There's a reason why there haven't been any oil rigs off our coastline since 1964, because they tend to get toppled over. Now, the nation's toughest ban on offshore drilling is already in place in New Jersey, a state that kicked up its opposition efforts 2 weeks ago with a lawsuit against the Trump administration demanding to know why Florida was offered a waiver while other states were not. And I'm sure that the feds will, meaning Trump and his guys, will get back to New Jersey and say, look, wait till after the midterms. If it's the black guy, don't worry, there's not going to be a waiver for Florida anymore. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But Nevers Radio broadcasts on with all the breaking news as it's breaking. We'll visit with you tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, because that's what we do. And please stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up with you right here tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.